Hey people, welcome back. I'm Indypride from Milk and Cookies Total War, and we're going to talk about legendary lord characters I expect to see in Total War Warhammer 2. Each of these videos will address one specific legendary lord character, from their background lore to their possible implementation in the second game of the trilogy. There are currently 3 races officially announced for Total War Warhammer 2, the High Elves of Ulthuan, the Dark Elves of Naggaroth, and the Lizardmen of Lustria. But there is a 4th race that, as we know, has been massively hinted at in the trailers, t-shirts, and even the logo that has been released thus far. The Skaven, the children of the Horned Rat. Now, why has CA not explicitly told us the Skaven are the 4th race yet? Well, there are a few reasons for that. First and foremost, it's a marketing tactic, straight up. Just how they handled the vampire counts in Game 1. Revealing everything about a game months and months before release is a bad move for sales. It lessens the impact of the reveal, anticipates over time as people forget about the trailer and information you revealed. If you hold on to that information and drop it closer to launch, it has a much more significant impact in terms of building hype and excitement and ultimately improving sales. The other reason the Skaven haven't been officially announced as the 4th race yet is because Creative Assembly is memeing. If you've been on Total War Reddit recently, you will have seen all the memes about how rodents of unusual size don't exist. That's preposterous. Report rat sightings to your local witch hunter, heresy, all of that kind of stuff. But that's not a new thing. That's been around for a very long time. And it starts with the Conspiracy of Silence, which is a very real part of Skaven lore. You see, important Empire officials and conspirators know about the Skaven under Empire, and they understand the threat that it poses. This is a gigantic webway of tunnels that stretches throughout the old world and beyond, in underground cities that are directly beneath many of the largest population centers in the Empire, where millions upon millions of technologically advanced and utterly evil humanoid rats live and fight and die. Do these officials all know the extent of the Under Empire? Probably not, but they do understand that if the Skaven were ever to unite and storm the surface, it would be game over. The Empire have more than enough problems on their hands dealing with Bray herds and chaos invasions and the undead from Sylvania. And if word was ever to reach the common folk that murderous rats lived beneath their very feet in numbers that reached upwards of millions, panic would spread like wildfire. Rule of law would be abolished as people rioted and looted and screamed for mercy, and the Skaven would see that as a gigantic opportunity to invade. So anyone in the Empire who openly speaks about the Skaven either has their name and reputation completely tarnished, or they're executed for heresy. Or Clan Eshin sends their assassins, because the Empire isn't the only faction that has a stake in keeping the Ratmen hush-hush and on the down low. The Skaven themselves truly believe that no Emperor or Lector Count or Grand Theogenist or Archlector knows of their existence. So as soon as they get word that a witch hunter or local magistrate had a sighting of Skaven, Clan Eshin assassins go to work, murdering those who might have enough sway to convince people of their existence. There's almost an unspoken agreement between these two factions who have very minimal contact with each other and who have certainly never agreed to any meaningful terms that knowledge of the Skaven Under Empire would be very bad for everyone involved. So they work to keep it a secret. But some Skaven characters are larger than life. They make such an indelible impact on the Warhammer world and have shown up in so many locations and wrought so much havoc throughout their history that it is almost impossible to keep their names from the headlines. Which leads me to the Rat of the Hour, the object of our dearest affections, one of the most popular and powerful characters in Skaven history, and indeed Warhammer history in general. And so enters Grey Seer Thanquol. Perhaps more than any other character, Thanquol encapsulates what the Skaven are all about. Murder, treachery, ambition, and a hilarious penchant for mischief that frequently results in catastrophic friendly fire and loss of Skaven life. He has shown up in dozens of novels and army books over the years, and has grown to be one of the most popular and omnipresent characters in Warhammer lore. I would be utterly shocked if he was not one of the starting 2 legendary lords for the Skaven in Game 2, but either way, his presence in the trilogy is all but guaranteed. So let's talk about him, his long list of accomplishments, and even longer list of failures, and why he is perfect for the Total War Warhammer series. Thanquol is a Grey Seer of great distinction. chosen of the Horned Rat, and a favored agent of the Council of 13, the Skaven ruling body, comprised of 12 Lords of Decay and an empty seat that represents their god. The Grey Seers are the spellcasters of Skaven society, incredibly dangerous and powerful, and fueled by Warpstone in the same way that Tony Montana is fueled by cocaine. Remember that Warpstone is chaos energy in its purest, most solid form, so while it often has mutating and deadly effects for most living creatures, Grey Seers snort it and chew it like candy, fueling ever more wild and dangerous spells. But of all the Grey Seers that comprise Clan Scrutin and advise the Council, Thanquol is the most ambitious, the most insane, the most deadly, and the most addicted to Warpstone, and that addiction is a big part of his character. Although technically under the command of Clan Scrutin's Seer Lord, he has served as a diplomat or general for many of the great Skaven clans and is more an instrument of the Council of 13 than a true member of any particular clan. He first came to prominence when he took command of the armies of the Skaven clan Scab, after his predecessor perished in a tragic accident involving a loaded crossbow and an exploding donkey, in the year 2499 of the Imperial calendar, some 3 years before the start date of Total War Warhammer. He commanded these newly acquired forces to attack the city of Nuln, and half the city was destroyed alongside the entire clan assigned to execute the invasion. What he didn't know at the time was that Clan Scab was a threat to the Council, and as is very common in Skaven society, the Lords of Decay backstabbed them and wanted them out of the picture for good. Now, of course, Thanquol and all his bottomless cunning quickly discovered this and made it seem like he had intentionally sent them to their doom rather than failing hopelessly in his planned invasion. At the siege of Citadel LaBeouf in Bretonnia, the Grey Seer failed to secure the drawbridges so the Clan Crick's horde could get inside, and blamed his gutter runners as a result. This is a very common theme in Skaven lore. Commanders are cowardly and evasive and will typically deflect blame to weaker creatures in their army before taking responsibility for anything bad, and by the same token will take all the credit for their underlings' accomplishments as well. The poison he had bought for them was so watered down as to be safely drinkable, but he had saved many warp tokens as a result, and he had even assigned an assassin to slay the Duke, but forgotten about that plan and reassigned him to kill upstart Skaven in his own ranks. Naturally, his Warpstone-addled mind was incredibly confused when he saw the Bretonnian Duke personally leading the countercharge into the Skaven hordes, when he was sure the assassin should have already accomplished the murder. During the siege of Karak Kadrin, he attempted to summon a Vermin Lord, which are effectively greater demons of the Horned Rat, and instead summoned Skarbrand the Exiled one of the mightiest and most terrifying bloodthirsters of Khorne in existence, who promptly eviscerated the Skaven horde upon his arrival on the material plane. But that, in a nutshell, is what makes Grey Seer Thanquol so special. He is a screw-up of immense proportions, but he is so goddamn powerful that his screw-ups result in feats of power few spellcasters in history could accomplish. Summoning Skarbrand is no easy feat. It requires immense amounts of energy, sacrifice, and chaotic power, and Thanquol just casually does it. Says, oops, I didn't mean to do that, dusts off his hands, chews on some Warpstone, and scurries off while his army is destroyed, and he goes gets another one. He's effectively a Saturday morning cartoon villain, except that his plans usually result in decapitation, dismemberment, disembowelment, and immolation of thousands of allied and enemy troops. I mean, it is Warhammer, so things are usually going to be a bit more grotesque than your weekend cartoon shows, but the cackling, maniacal laughter, and evil world-ending plots are much the same. As with all Ratmen, Thanquol has an utter disregard for the lives of his minions, and his Rat Ogre Bone Ripper is one of the few, if only, characters that he ever shows any genuine compassion for, and even that is a bit of a stretch. Bone Ripper has died many times throughout the history of Warhammer, and comes back in a variety of different incarnations and configurations throughout his partnership with the Grey Seer. In fact, most versions of Bone Ripper are killed off by two of the most popular characters in Warhammer fantasy history, Gotrek and Felix, who had a series spanning more than a dozen novels, and who are famous in part for their gigantic rivalry with Thanquol. The first Bone Ripper is killed off in solo combat with Gotrek, the second swallows a dwarf bomb thrown by Felix Jaeger, the fourth is slain by Lord Skrulk of Clan Pestilence, the fifth is assassinated by none other than the Deathmaster himself, the seventh is the body of the first Bone Ripper, resurrected by Clan Scryer's Technomancy, and the 13th is again killed by Gotrek on the deck of a Skaven submarine many years later. But despite being fodder for the famous duo in their novels, Bone Ripper is a very important companion for the Grey Seer Thanquol. He has been outfitted with warp fire throwers, warpstone power fists, extra arms, and all manner of diabolical machinery over the years, and as with all rat ogres, can cause untold destruction once he wades into melee and gets his teeth and claws a hold of his prey. Naturally, he turns Thanquol into something of a melee powerhouse when the two are together, as you would expect from a towering clan molder monstrosity outfitted with power weapons. You may have already noticed it from the lore we've covered up to this point, but perhaps the one thing that separates Thanquol most from any other character is his sheer amount of luck. He has the blessings of the Horned Rat, and combined with his legendary paranoia and cowardice when he senses things might be going south, this means he has routinely escaped the most dire of circumstances to no ill effect. Military campaigns that go utterly awry under his command still somehow result in promotions up the Skaven hierarchy. He has been demoted more times than he can count, and as much as he has been lauded and elevated by his peers, but each time he comes back with a vengeance, successfully destroying his enemies and conquering his rivals before things go poorly yet again. This insane and streaky luck comes straight from the tabletop, with a special rule called Blessing of the Horned One, where damage meant for Thanquol deflects to nearby models or is completely ignored if he makes his ward save. I have my doubts if that special rule will be implemented into Total War Warhammer as a combat ability, but I think it would be doable where any damage taken by Thanquol is equally distributed amongst allied units in a very small 15-meter radius around him, or something along those lines. Thanquol is a perfect starting legendary lord because you can have him start literally anywhere in the Warhammer world. He has battled Khornate Berserkers in Kislev, he has fought for control of the Slayer Keep and the World's Edge Mountains, he personally saw to the utter annihilation of the Temple City of Ketsa and Lustria, and serves as the preeminent and most written about Skaven character in history. Now we know that both Lustria and the Southlands will be in Total War Warhammer 2. Clan Pestilence could return to Lustria at any point, but since Sotek kicked their collective asses out of Lustria, their home base has been in the Southlands ever since, which is where I think that subfaction might start. That would then mean we get Grey Seer Thanquol in Lustria as a wildcard Skaven faction, bringing to bear all the great clans' power and weaponry. Starting in the defiled city of Ketsa would make a lot of sense, but honestly, it's just as likely the script is flipped, with Clan Pestilence returning to Lustria at the start of the Total War Warhammer 2 campaign, with Thanquol starting in the Southlands. How the capital city of Skavenblight between Talea and Astalia, as a tie-in between Game 1 and Game 2 is implemented, still remains to be seen. I'm not quite sure how CA is going to handle that, but we'll see soon enough. So let's talk about his implementation and skill set in the trilogy. Obviously, Bone Ripper will be his mount choice, a gigantic rat ogre that gives him ranged firepower, melee prowess, and a much beefier HP pool on top of being unbreakable. One of the few casters in the game who will be completely unbreakable, I would think. He would be a dual caster with access to the Skaven Lores of Ruin and Plague, and the dreaded 13th spell, an incredibly famous and rage-inducing spell that turns units into clan rats. I imagine this would function very similarly to Morgur's direct damage Chaos Spawn summon. So say you have an enemy unit that drops below 20% health, you effectively one-shot them with the direct damage spell and summon clan rats in their place. I think if CA goes all out with the spell, it will make a lot of people very, very happy, as it is one of the most hilarious magic abilities in the source material. You can turn a whole unit of Chaos Warriors into clan rats that you can control yourself. I think that would be an amazing addition to the game, but obviously for balance reasons, it will likely be toned down to function much like Morgur's Chaos Spawn ability. So the Skaven spells of Ruin combine Warp Lightning magic missiles, direct damage, and a spell called Skitter Leap that allows a unit to instantly teleport. And as I'm sincerely hoping for a magic revamp, I'd like to see this as an actual teleport spell and not something like a lame 24% movement speed bonus like we've seen with a lot of the spells in Total War Warhammer 1. So please make it an actual teleport, make it fun to use, don't make it some flat debuff that no one cares about. The spells of Plague confer poison attacks and generally debuff enemy combat effectiveness, and combine some direct damage spells in there as well. Obviously, being a dual caster would make Thanquol a step above your traditional Grey Seer, although in the tabletop, Grey Seers are also able to draw spells from the lore of Plague and the lore of Ruin, so we'll see how CA decides to handle that, but I definitely believe Thanquol should be a dual caster. His quest items would be for the Warp Amulet Talisman and the Staff of the Horned One, while his magic pool and recharge rate would be much greater than other Grey Seers because of his extra Warpstone tokens that he always lugs around with him. So the Warpstone Amulet was made even before the Council of 13 became the ruling body of the Skaven and allows Thanquol to regenerate wounds. So honestly, from a Total War Warhammer 2 perspective, he's starting to sound a lot like Morgor the Shadow gave. Regen, tankiness on Bone Ripper, and a direct damage summon spell. The Staff of the Horned One grants him an additional spell in tabletop, but might just translate to cheaper spells in multiplayer for Total War Warhammer, so the more spells you equip from Ruin and Plague, the more cost efficient the item is. As with all campaign items, these will be granting corruption and public order bonuses and improved combat stats as well. But with all that said, I do think Thanquol will be one of the 2 starting legendary lords in Total War Warhammer. I only touched the surface of his lore in this video. There's even more to him in many Black Library novels that show off his cunning character in all of his glory. And I hope you guys enjoy this look into the character and how he might translate into Total War Warhammer. And over the next weeks and months or so, I will be doing more Legendary Lord videos for the characters we can expect to see in Total War Warhammer 2. I already have a pretty good idea of what unannounced characters will be coming in Game 2, but if you have any ideas or suggestions, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time. Indypride, signing out for now.